Welcome to The Authentic Spiritual Journey, a weekly podcast featuring real and practical spiritual conversations from diverse perspectives here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. Today, episode 226, Hitting Roadblocks. And now your host, Reverend Cynthia Alice Anderson.
Hello and welcome to The Authentic Spiritual Journey. My name is RCA. I'm the host and I'm here today in 818 Studios with my producer.
Good morning, everybody. This is Dave Croft. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of The Authentic Spiritual Journey. As always, I want to welcome you to a brand new week. Or, if you're listening to this on a Friday, I hope you had a great week.
Yeah, exactly.
But we know that you have a lot of options out there. And so we want to thank you for spending part of your day with us.
Yes, it's going to be a great, great day. And I know a lot of you listen as you drive or cook, or somebody said to me the other day, well, I just put it on your channel and let it play on YouTube. And I think that's awesome. I do that myself sometimes. And recently I've been really motivated by our work together, Dave. And also Donna Bevan Lee's show lately has been lighting me up. She's done such a great job and her work is very deep, on healing your family legacy. So that's been a lot of fun and really proud to have her on the channel as well. So that's been a lot of fun. And today is going to, you're going to say, am I listening to RCA or Donna or Monique or all the above? Because today's topic will touch every area of your life. It is spiritual. It is emotional. It has a therapeutic aspect and content. So, Dave, give us our title for today.
Yes, certainly. The title for today's episode is Hitting Roadblocks, episode 226, Hitting Roadblocks.
Yeah, 226. Wow. Sometimes I need to pause a moment with that.
We've now done...
How do we do that?
We've done more shows, I think, than I did when I did my 11-year-long run of drummer talk. Because I was nowhere nearly this consistent when I was just, talking about drums and stuff.
Well, somebody said to me the other day, I think you're working too hard. And I said, well, I wouldn't be surprised about that, but what do you mean? And he said, well, you already have so much content out there. Why don't you just sit back and let people find it and, not quit working so hard? I go, well, maybe I should work a little bit smarter. I said, but I can't help it.
Yeah, no, I
can't help it. And but go ahead.
Yeah, no, when it comes out of a place of passion and a place that just naturally effervesces out of you, like you almost can't help yourself,
right?
Then it's easy. Like I was riding back from recently from playing running sound at Unity North Tampa, and Mark was in the car, my friend Mark. And he was asking me about, composing music and stuff. And I thought, and then he said, "Oh, I'm really sorry about talking about work." And I'm like, "Well, are you kidding? I can literally talk about this all day, every day. And in fact, I do. So this isn't,
as a matter of fact,
this doesn't work at all." And so, when it's coming out of that natural well within you, and it doesn't, you can really talk about it all day.
It's true, and I love to do it. And frankly, friends, me talking about it to you keeps me honest in my process. Mm-hmm. It makes me stay consistent, aware, moving forward, and it helps me challenge myself in these teachings. And what I'm hoping you're hearing as time moves on is you're hearing my development also. I'm developing as a minister, as a speaker, as a podcast host. I'm developing in my emotional and spiritual life. And I want you to be able to see my growth and experience it with me. And so we grow together. And if I just, quote unquote, leave the content out there, that's not going to happen. Yes, I'm going to reach more people, but over time, I might reach people over time with those numbers, but I will reach more people by continuing to put out content and you sharing it. And what matters to me is ministering to people. So when you give, online to this ministry, it ensures we'll keep doing it. Because I couldn't do it for free all the time, even though I have done it many, many times for free. Because it's a gift. It's a gift to share. And I'm grateful for the support, though, that keeps it going. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And we're on a journey together, Dave and I. We're different people than we were when this started, several years ago.
Yeah, that's true. And I do appreciate being a small part of your story.
Oh,
here.
Big part. Yeah, big part. Big part. So, Dave, give us the title one more time.
Hitting roadblocks, talking about growing and living life and making plans and then hitting roadblocks when things don't go according to plan.
It wasn't the show right before this flow. I'm thinking it was.
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
And so that's exactly why I'm talking about it, because when we're on the spiritual journey, we love to flow. We love for it to be easy. Somehow we have some idea. I think it's all the self-help gurus that make it seem like you just do these 5 things, or for me, these 7 things. Just do these 7 laws and all will be well. And you're like, what?
Yeah, it just works out. Yeah.
Yeah, it just works out, but I myself have to live life. I was sharing with Dave right before. I got a dryer repairman coming. I've got, the things to organize and take care of. So I'm living my life just like you are. I'm not in some utopian existence. However, I see how my journey is guided. I see the spiritual lessons. I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm expanding in my awareness of myself and God. And, that's what the journey is. So even though sometimes self-help gurus make it seem like if we just do these 5 things, life will be perfect, what we know is there is an ebb and flow. And last week we talked deeply about flow and the flow state. Dave, you shared a little bit about your journey. I shared a little bit about mine. And a natural part of any journey is an ebb and flow. When you go to the ocean, the tide doesn't just come in, it goes back out.
Right.
Right. And so it helps me always to go to nature, because I find that what happens in nature happens with us and with our journey. And I mean, even Jesus hit roadblocks. Even the Buddha hit roadblocks. So, somebody said to me one time, in a Unity congregation, they had gotten a bad diagnosis, and they were saying, they felt unspiritual. And I said, one of the greatest leaders of all time spiritually, Sai Baba, died. He had a stroke. Like this is called the human experience. And so, he was partially paralyzed before his death. And he was able to manifest and do miracles as Jesus did. But he didn't get out of the human experience. Jesus did not get out of the human experience. And so what I want to help us do today with this idea of hitting roadblocks is try to get a new perspective. And I was working with this so deeply. I was sharing with Dave. I'd already recorded this show, and now I have to record it again, and for a variety of reasons.
Well, because you kept hitting roadblocks while recording the show on hitting roadblocks.
It was funny. It was, on hitting roadblocks. Like Spirit's like, okay, get this, So as we begin this idea today, I want you to remember that God's will for me is good. If we were in church, I'd say that with me now. Right.
Yeah, I'll say it with you.
All right. God's will for me is good. Yeah, God's will for me is good. And another aspect of that comes back to me as a mantra is God is always working on my behalf. Right? Even if I can't see it, God is always working on my behalf. So when we're going along the journey and we're flowing and life is feeling good, and then all of a sudden a roadblock happens, like all of a sudden the direction our career was heading, like that doesn't happen right away. So in that moment where it stops, where we feel like the flow is over, or we get discouraged, we go, oh my God, everything was going so great. Now I have to deal with this. Right? When that happens, you get usually thrown into a trauma response. Because most of us grew up without a lot of support. And so as we start to feel like we're powerful co-creators, and then we can move forward and we have a lot of power in our lives. And then when it doesn't go just as we think, we feel like the rug's pulled out from under us, and we say things like, this is never going to happen for me. Or I can't believe this is happening again. Or why does this always happen to me? Yeah, these are the kind of phrases that come up. And so what we're doing is our ego is saying, well, I wanted to go here and I'm not here, so I'm going to make that wrong. And because it's so similar to how we were not supported as kids, we go into that trauma response of fight, flight, or freeze, right? Those are the three basic responses. And usually in a freeze, there's what I like to call an emotional collapse. And it's where we don't know what to do. And instead of being in our power, instead of talking through it, instead of reaching out for help, we kind of cave in. And often even the body goes into that. The body goes into that posture of shoulders down, sunken in belly. It's like we've been sucker punched. That's kind of how it feels.
Yeah, we Shannon and I call that shutdown, like when you just shut down. Yep.
Yeah. It's total shutdown. And the reason I'm trying to slow this down is that it took me years to understand that I hadn't done something wrong, but I needed to shift my perspective on what is the lesson in this happening. And as we talked about with Eddie Sellover in his, interview, which I don't think has aired yet, but he'll talk about it coming up, where, so I'm going to give you a preview to his interview, but he was talking about when we get into judgment, that any curiosity, any creativity is basically over. So if we hit a roadblock and then judge it or shut down or stay in that trauma response, if we do that, then there's no curiosity. In other words, there's no learning. And so the ego's job always is to judge. And what's wonderful about that is that that's probably at times kept you safe and out of danger. But spiritually, the ego can get in the way often because it misjudges what's happening. And so that's why we talk so much about growing, prospering, and evolving, is because your soul has a higher awareness. I will even call it a soul intellect is bigger than the mind, right? The mind is rooted in the here and now, third dimension. The soul is rooted in eternity. So when we start believing things like God's will for me is good, God is always working on my behalf, and we hit a roadblock, rather than shutting down and going into that trauma response, we seek to pull back that projection of what we think is happening and get curious about what is the reason it might be happening. In other words, what is the lesson right here, right now? I was sharing with Dave right before we began recording this morning that some intentions I had 3 years ago are coming to fruition now, and it's pretty effortless. 3 years ago, the intention was set, the vision was set, the work was being done, but there wasn't a divine timing. So this is what I'm saying. Sometimes the roadblock serves a purpose, and it's not really a roadblock. It feels like a roadblock, but it's a pause. And so what is the pause for? Well, that's a great question. What is the pause for? What is the pause for? So you're flowing along, life seems good, and then boom, a roadblock. With a dear friend of mine, it was a physical illness that was completely unexpected. And she was just spun around. Anybody would have been. And I said, you will get through this. When you get to the other side, you will get the lesson. So the pause serves a purpose. Sometimes the purpose is to help you integrate the things you're learning, the things you're intending, the things you're moving towards. Because we think in the linear and the soul operates holographically. We think we go point A to point B, like a line on a math problem. But that's not how life is. We have an intention, we move toward it, and there's twists, there's turns. And as those twists and turns happen, a new consciousness is being created. So sometimes that pause, and I will say every time, that pause is to serve your soul's highest journey. It may not be exactly getting the goal when your ego wants it, but that may not be your highest awareness. Because when you set that goal, when you set that intention, right after you set it from this highest spiritual place, your ego said, yes, and that's it, and that's the way it's going to be, and now I know what I'm doing. The ego always attaches to outcomes. And the spiritual journey is the opposite of that. And I talked about that last week a little bit too, that I've really been working on detachment from outcomes. It's so hard because I love to set goals. I love to move forward. I love to see things happen. But what I've learned to do as I am, if I bump up against a little resistance, and that's often what a roadblock feels like, is some resistance to my forward movement, I'm going, well, wait a minute. What is this here for me? What is this about? So your ego attaches to outcomes, but spirit flows. So if there's a block, this pause could be, and I would say most definitely is, for your soul's benefit. So my prayer during a time like this is something like this. God, even though I don't understand what's happening, I know that your will for me is good. I know you're always working on my behalf. So I'm praying to see the purpose in this. There's a little bit of surrender that goes on. I'm praying to see the purpose in this because I really want this. I thought this is what you were guiding me to do. So I'm just going to wait for an answer until I know what's mine to do.
Well, I think sometimes when we set out our plans and then that they don't go, I think, if you're driving down the road and you see a roadblock, the first reaction is to think like that there's been a landslide blocking the road, or the road has been, but sometimes it's like for your own good. There's something ahead that maybe there's construction happening, and what's going to happen is the road's going to get made smoother in the long run. Sometimes it's just a detour, sometimes it's just a guy with a sign that he turns and says, just slow down, just
exactly
slow down. But it's not always a mudslide, taking out the bridge.
Right. Well, and we all often go into catastrophizing when something doesn't go just it's like, what am I doing all this for? It's like we blow it up. And I've learned too that psychologically that's called a manic defense. It's so much easier to do that than to just feel what's happening. But you're speaking to my next point, Dave, which is about just sometimes we just need a regroup. Yeah. Just slow down a little bit, regroup. Yeah. When we were planning our 200th episode, I first had this idea of doing this huge party. And every time I checked in about it, Spirit was like, no, just invite the people that have supported you financially, because they're the people that keep the show going. And I thought, is that okay? I had to get my head around that. Like, I always want to involve everybody. And I thought, my guidance was so clear. No, just these people. And what was so special about that 200th episode event is everyone there had a clear investment in the show. And actually, two of our largest donors couldn't be there and sent an extra gift. I said, no, I'm trying to thank you. And they were like, no, thank you. So that pause in that process made that a more special event. I was thinking, oh, let's get a bunch of people and celebrate. And it was like, oh no, let's honor those people who've been with us. And that honoring was special because it was a smaller group. Everyone talked to each other. And I heard people, I'm still hearing about that. And it was 6 months ago or longer. And people are still saying to me, that was really cool. The venue was awesome. And I love that we had these mugs that you gave us and we got to just drink out of them and take them home. I said, yeah, I was trying to do no waste. They were like, yeah, that was obvious. It was obvious that there was like a cool vibe. Now, so if I wouldn't have gotten that pause, it wouldn't have been as special of an event. I would have spent a lot more money in creating it. And I would not have honored the people who've really given big to the show and ensured that we stay on the air. So my initial thought was an idea of celebration. How could that be bad? But the pause helped serve the highest good that wanted to come forward in that situation. So it wasn't a bad pause, but it was unexpected because I kept thinking I couldn't find a venue, and then I couldn't find a venue, and I was finally like, well, wait a minute, what's trying to come forward? I had the idea of being in a coffee shop. And then what was so amazing when that didn't work out, the coffee shop said, well, even though we can't have it, is it okay if we just donate all the coffee for the event? Yeah, that'd be okay. I think I drank more coffee that day than I had an entire week before.
I literally lost count.
Yeah. So we're talking about, friends, if you're, just jumping into the show, for some reason, I'm feeling the need to reiterate where we're going. And we were talking about when you're flowing along the journey and we hit something that feels like a roadblock, what do we do? And we're saying the normal human response in the beginning is to react, to go into the trauma state, to think, what did I do wrong? To go into fight, flight, or freeze, or this emotional collapse. And what we're saying is it may be time to pull back that projection from that old reaction and simply say, what does this have to do with me and my journey? What is trying to come forward? And realize it's not a block. It could be a pause to reintegrate, we said, or to integrate what's been happening. It might be time, as Dave alluded to regroup and kind of gather your troops again and say, wow, what is this? And if you work with a team in your life or your work, sometimes you have a support team therapeutically. Maybe you have a minister and a therapist, or maybe you have a life coach and a spouse that's really engaged in your process. Maybe you talk to them about, what are you seeing this? And can you help me get a new perspective? Because sometimes where we're seeing it is limited and from the ego. And we're trying to rise up and get the soul aspect, a soul discernment. And then to use that phrase, either God's will for me is good and or God is always working on my behalf. Those are phrases that are going to help lift you up into that. The other phrase the other thing that could be happening, so we said it could be an integration time, could be a regroup, could also be time to pivot. Time to pivot. Anybody remember when COVID first happened? Pivot was the word of the year. What I know about that is nobody I talked to was interested in pivoting. We all just wanted life to keep going. And guess what? We didn't get that choice. So this is what I'm saying about these teachings. Sometimes the journey brings you things you don't expect. And rather than being in the trauma state and triggered to hell and back, we want to be able to navigate that change with ease, with grace, and grow in and through and move on to our next step. So sometimes it is time to change direction. I've shared many stories of that on the show. And sometimes the work, those pivots are inward. It has nothing to do with career or your major relationships. It might simply be the way you're thinking about yourself and your process. Could be very, very subtle. Could be very, very subtle. We recently did a weekend retreat at Unity North Tampa. It was called Spiritual Recovery, the Next Frontier of Healing. That Next Frontier of Healing was kind of our tagline, because we were coming from a recovery perspective, but also saying, however you got here, that works. And we were talking about how can we heal in and through. And the last part of the retreat, I had my friend Lynn Barrett do some work on Jane Elizabeth Hart's 7 Steps. And we've talked about that particular teaching numerous times on the show. And I was very honored to be able to present on the Friday night, but all day Saturday, I got to just experience all the speakers. What was so beautiful about the speakers is that they all had a slightly different message about awakening. And this work that Lynn did really inspired me to go really deep in my consciousness to look at an old belief that was still driving my life in a way I wasn't aware. Because she was talking about forgiveness and the 7 steps. And, friends, I've done so much forgiveness work, all the big things in my life. I mean, things I went through as a child, issues with my mom. I mean, there may be more work to do in the future, but at this moment, I've done all the work there is to do. It's just, I have forgiven and forgiven and forgiven and forgiven. I've written about it, spoken on it, done talks about it, written about it in books. I mean, forgiveness has been that old phrase, forgiveness is my middle name, right? I have just absolutely been about forgiveness. And so when I was scanning my mind and my heart during that workshop, I thought, well, what is there? I was checking in, not this, not this. And something else came to my mind. I said, okay, I'll do that later. But today I'm getting that's not that. And then it dropped in, and it was so subtle. And it was literally this repetitive thought I had about myself. And so I realized that had been a little bit of a roadblock in my consciousness. So see, it can be very, very subtle as well. I'm not saying you're going along and all of a sudden you get fired from a job. I mean, that certainly does feel like a roadblock. But sometimes the work can be so small, it's seemingly small. In other words, as your work develops, it starts to be more and more minute, but the change has larger and larger consequences in a good way, right? Larger and larger impacts. So here's what I mean. Let me talk about that for a second. When we first learn that we're powerful co-creators, we start wanting to manifest stuff. And we're like, okay, I think about it, I focus on it, I'm going to get it. And maybe we need a new car, or maybe we want a boat, or maybe we want a new house, or maybe we want a certain level of income. And we're like, oh, cool. So it's kind of like moving big mounds of dirt from here to there. We realize we're powerful. Well, as the journey goes on, rather than moving big mounds of dirt, because you've already done that, you have to get out a shovel. And the shovel moves some things. The shovel moves some things. Then it's like you're on a archaeological dig, and you've got a little tiny paintbrush and toothbrush. And you have to clear out the dirt to get to the good stuff. So that's the point many of you, our listeners, are at this point. I know that. I know that because those of you really doing the work, reach out, you share with me. And I want you to be able to call on this inner spiritual discernment as you work through these times. So a seeming roadblock could be job related, it could be money related, and it could be simply thoughts and beliefs. And in my recent work, that was super powerful to work through. And I'm still gaining insights from it, and it'll probably be several weeks of continuing to find new ways of reframing that. So the journaling's done, the forgiveness, meditation, and release was done, but now I have to create new habits in my thinking, which takes a while. I've heard it quoted, and I'm sure you have, that when you do anything 21 times, it creates a new habit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've definitely heard that before.
Well, one of my dear friends and students who does work with the brain says, sorry to tell you, it's actually more like 250 times. She said that's a false number, that 21 times. And I said, oh.
That's a lot more work.
I said, well, the good news is now I know why the 21 didn't work. The bad news is now I have to do it 250 times. So our touchstones in our process are these phrases. God's will for me is good. God is always working on my behalf. And remembering, friends, that as you're going along the journey, if you're hitting something or, that you don't understand, or you're having to pause when you least expect it, I want to make sure you have those ideas, those spiritual touchstones to come back to. I want to make sure you remember that God is always working on your behalf, and that if there's a pause, there's a reason. And my hope for you is that if you go into that old trauma response, that you pull back that projection and can get in the now moment and say, what does this have to do with my journey now? What is the lesson here for me? And know that I can pause and shift my perspective to see, is it time to integrate? Is it time to regroup? Is it time to pivot? And then use that soul of yourself, that spiritual discernment that's always with you, to make decisions about next steps and how to navigate through. What we want you to know is that we're here for you. We're lifting you up. We're praying with and for you. We are always seeing God's highest and best in your life, and really, really honor you and your journey. The last thing I want you to always hear me say, is blessings on the journey. But before I say that, I want you to hear me say again, God's will for you is good. And God is always working on your behalf. So you can rest in that, dear friend, and know we're praying that with you. So blessings on the journey, and we'll see you next week.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Authentic Spiritual Journey here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. This channel is made possible because of listeners just like you. If you would like to support the channel with your tax-deductible contribution on an ongoing basis or through a one-time gift, head over to experienceofthesoul.com/support. The Authentic Spiritual Journey is copyright 2022, Cynthia Alice Anderson, all rights reserved. Our theme music is composed by Dave Croft and used with permission from RR Hot Publishing. The Experience of the Soul podcast channel is a production of 818 Studios.
Thank you for listening to the show today, dear friends. I'm always happy to have you along the journey. If you're seeking deeper work, though, I'm going to invite you into one-on-one coaching with me. In my coaching work, I get to glean from my over 30 years of experience of working with individuals and leaders in the community on their spiritual journey. So I have a wealth of information that will help you along the journey, and it will be supportive. It will be supportive of your dreams, goals, and desires, but it will also be confrontive, because I am going to help you confront those limiting patterns and beliefs and help you break through those aspects and move into looking at life in a more holistic way. So even though it will be confrontive and at times even challenging, you will learn to grow, you will learn to prosper, and you will evolve into the person you have always wanted to be. Friends, the answers lie within you, and I am so honored to help empower you to live that truth and that goodness in the world. If you want to learn more about coaching with me, simply go to CynthiaAliceAnderson.com and go to the coaching section for more information. That's CynthiaAliceAnderson.com and go to coaching. and I'll be happy to set up a one-on-one call so we can discuss how I can best support your journey. Thanks again for joining me today, dear friend, and blessings on the journey.
Hey friends, Sean here, your Experience of the Soul producer. I want to take a moment to tell you about something truly exciting. The Soulworks online community, created by your host, Cynthia Alice Anderson, and available on the Mighty Networks app. If you're looking for a place where you can explore your spiritual path, connect with others, and grow in a meaningful way, then this is for you. Soulworks is so much more than an online community. It's a safe, inclusive space for spiritual exploration, self-discovery, and personal transformation. Inside the community, you'll find everything from uplifting spiritual studies to soul-centered growth practices, meditations, affirmations, and so much more. It's a space where you'll always be supported and never judged. The best part, membership is free. You'll have access to powerful resources, inspiring content, and a supportive group of like-minded people who are all on their own unique spiritual journeys. And if you're ready to dive deeper, there are premium options available to enhance your experience with a live Monday night talk series and extended, deeper meditations. If you're seeking a place to connect, grow, and nurture your soul, we would love to have you join us in the Soulworks community and see where this journey can take you. Visit my.soulworkscommunity.com today.